So what we think is, because we sort of sit between all these entities, right, we have a fairly unique position in the market, which means we are able to facilitate events like this, so forums, thought leadership kind of events, where people can come and learn more and really get some insight into the different commercial aspects of what we do and what our clients do. So the other thing I wanted to say is it's really nice to have an event that is in person, right? It's fantastic to have some people in the room at least. We've also got some people online who we can't see, but we wanted to get you in the room, and the reason we postponed the event to be able to get some people in the room at least was because we want you to participate. We want this to be a discussion. So please see it as that. Please don't be afraid. Please ask questions. We have a roving mic, which we can get to if you just stick your hand up and give a nod to Janet at the back, or Bianca, who'll be at the back there as well. So please do participate where you can. There'll be time for Q&A at the end as well. So without further ado, I think I've said enough. I'm going to hand it over to Sean. You just need to turn on the mic by pressing the button. OK, green. To just give you a little introduction to Talon, who they are and what they do. So Sean, take it away.
Cool. Before I get started, I just want to thank everyone for coming today to this event and basically hear more about the esports landscape and also what we're doing as well. Also, thank you to Burden as well as Alex as well. I just want to also do a bit of a shout out for Alex and say that out of all the lawyers and law firms that we've worked here in Hong Kong, I think having knowledge around esports, the marketing rights, the IP rights, and the whole sort of ecosystem, it's important to have a sound fundamental knowledge of where things are at. And I think, I just want to say Alex definitely has that knowledge, and I think it's very useful for any brands who are looking to enter the space, that working with people who are experienced and understand the space, which I think is very important. And they've brokered many huge deals, and I think it's just a testament to them. Stop. So just to talk a little bit about what Talon is first. So essentially what we are is an esports platform. And we have a number of different business lines, but essentially there are three key business lines that we have. Those are basically a talent management side of things. So we manage and operate and have built several teams across the market. So we have 7 professional teams in 5 different markets, those being in mainland China, South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, underneath the esports team or talent management as well. We also have a number of KOLs and influencers. And essentially what these people are influencers within the gaming space that basically provide general entertainment content from a gaming perspective. We also have a creative studio, and this creative studio essentially is a dedicated studio for esports and gaming. So, there are many marketing agencies out there that do cover different areas such as beauty, such as financial services, such as, auto, but we cover primarily gaming and esports. So if brands are looking for opportunities on how they can activate within the esports space, we actually have a number of different ways that we can support them. So, for example, you want to come up with a digital campaign to promote a particular product or service, we are capable of doing that in-house, either through the teams that we manage or through our network that we have throughout Asia Pacific. Inside that creative studio as well, this year we've actually been granted by Riot the exclusive tournament rights to 2 new IPs, those being Mobile Legends Wild Rift, or League of Legends Wild Rift, and another game called Valorant, which is a first-person shooter. And so we'll be running exclusive tournaments, or have the exclusive IP rights to run those tournaments for Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Macau. And lastly, we have an academy, and the academy is very similar to a traditional sports club, where we take younger players and basically build a system where that allows them to become the next superstars for the various titles. Our academy is pretty much focused around League of Legends and Overwatch, and we are expanding that into a whole bunch of different schooling institutions in Taiwan and potentially Korea as well. So at a high level, essentially what we are is a platform that covers multiple aspects of esports, but primarily the main focus for us right now is on the team side. Yeah.
Cool, thanks very much. And I think, take a seat, mate, we don't have to have you standing for the whole 45. But I thought one of the things that was sort of most interesting about you guys is, and the reason that this is cool, right, is because you don't just have one team, you have 7, right? 8, is that right? 7 or 8?
Yep.
But each of those teams is a different game, it's a different jurisdiction. And I think when I first sort of started to get to know esports, what kind of blew my mind is that the audience is not the same for each game or in each jurisdiction. And so actually you're targeting really different people. So can you just maybe talk to us a bit about what each of those teams represent? Is it mobile, is it console, and who the sort of target audiences are in each of those jurisdictions?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the most difficult things about navigating the esports space for brands when they're coming in is to truly understand what are the different sports, if I want to use that analogy, right? Like a particular game, or what are the particular sports that each particular market watches, right? And if you look at Asia, it's incredibly fragmented, and that's what makes it really difficult to understand. Like, let's say you want to enter into Korea, you want to enter into Hong Kong, Taiwan, you want to enter into Southeast Asia. The actual games, leagues, and teams that you work with are fundamentally different across all these different titles, and so it makes it very hard to truly understand, like, if I go into Korea, what is the most popular league? What are the most popular teams? What are the most popular games? What are the most popular platforms, right? So if you look at, and these are all things that you have to consider and factor in. And I think a lot of that knowledge is not openly available to brands who want to activate into the space. You can't just go to Korea and ask any random person, say, hey, what is the #1 focus if they don't have that featuring, that knowledge in gaming. And so for us, the way we're building it is that, as Talon, as an esports platform, we want to become the premier Asia Pacific platform. And what it means by that is to actually have a presence from Japan all the way down to Australia. So having teams in all these respective markets. As you can see, we're here now, and next year we have plans for Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And what that allows for, the logic behind it is that, when brands do come to us and want to activate across Asia Pacific, that we're able to provide them a sort of one-stop shop when it comes to activations across multiple markets, which we think is quite powerful. Now, our logic around sort of entering particular games is really focused on ROI when it comes to marketing dollars, when it comes to building a brand, when it comes to be able to sort of build a fan base very quickly. And I'll just use Thailand and, let's say, Hong Kong as examples of the differences in logic. In Thailand and Southeast Asia, PC gaming and console gaming are not huge areas of adoption. But what is big in Southeast Asia is mobile gaming, and mobile gaming has been a huge driver. And the reason for that is, firstly, not everyone can afford super high-end PCs and all the infrastructure that goes behind that, but generally, I would say everyone has a mobile phone, right? And in these countries, the internet connections, whether it be 3G, 4G, 5G, is incredibly powerful. So what you've seen in Southeast Asia is a huge explosion of mobile esports being the #1 titles. And thus, when we went into Thailand, the main title that we looked at after doing our research was ROV Pro League. On a weekly basis, they get close to 200,000 people watching this league on a weekly basis, which is absolutely insane. And all of that is within the local Thai market. And when they do regional tournaments, you get close to 1 million concurrent viewers for this game. So it just shows you how big this audience is. Now, this game is also popular in Hong Kong, but let's say the most watched esports in Hong Kong is actually League of Legends, because historically PC gaming has been something that has been quite popular. I'm not saying it is the dominant now. Mobile gaming is becoming very big in Hong Kong as well. But when it comes to the professional leagues, the PCS is the most watched league, and League of Legends is the most popular game. And so when we look at the logic around why we entered these games, it's due to the fact that how can we reach the largest audience and build the strongest fan base in a very short period of time? And it's about doing your research and understanding what are the games that are locally adopted, accepted, and watched, and basically focusing on that. So you go into Vietnam, League of Legends and Arena of Valor is the most popular game. In the Philippines, Dota 2, Mobile League of Legends, Bang Bang, maybe Free Fire. In Indonesia, Mobile Legends is the most popular game. So you have to actually be quite knowledgeable and work with the publishers very closely to understand where the interest is and where people are following, and then basically adapt accordingly.
And how do you judge that though? So if you're going into a new market which you haven't covered yet, what do you look for when you're going into that new market? Are you looking for audience? Are you looking for a game which is kind of cheap to get into? What are you looking at as a team owner?
Yeah, so it's a mixture of all those things. So definitely the audience is a big thing. Also, what are the costs associated with those various games, and how do we maximize the ROI from a marketing expenditure? I just want to talk about Korea a little bit. So, for example, Korea, the two games that we're in are actually not the most popular games. The most popular game in Korea is League of Legends, but Overwatch Contenders is somewhat a close second, right? But the reason why we picked Overwatch Contenders is because League of Legends, let's say, for example, they recently just franchised, but let's say the ticket to buy into League of Legends in Korea is 10 million US. It's not something that we have lying around to invest into. But for Overwatch Contenders, it doesn't cost us anything, but the viewership is not as big as the LCK, which is the Korean League of Legends League, but it's still reasonably sized that you can build a fan base and an audience in Korea. So it's kind of a mixture of sort of what are the costs that we need to put down, what is the sort of audience size, how many people actually playing that game locally, and sort of what is the publisher doing to support that league. Because the publisher actually plays an important part, because if they create the right economic incentives for the teams to benefit from, then it actually is quite powerful as well.
And that's a nice point, actually, because it kind of brings us on to the next point, right, around publishers and what the ecosystem looks like. So I know, just looking around the room, there's people here who are super familiar with the esports ecosystem and those who aren't. But it might just be worth, I think, just pausing for a moment on that publisher point and just sort of considering where Talon fits in this ecosystem, right? So top left, we've got the game publishers, so Riot, Garena, EA. You've got the games, and this is where kind of your position is really unique, right? Because it's not quite the same as a Manchester United or a Liverpool or whatever, right? It's slightly different because of that relationship with the publishers. And maybe you can talk to us a bit about that, and we can come on to the Valorant point a little bit later, right? But just now, how do you see yourself as a team? How do you see your relationship with those publishers who kind of hold all of that power? So Riot, Garena, EA.
Yeah, I think with the publishers and the teams, there needs to be a good mutual understanding and a working relationship in order to improve the standards of the leagues and the viewership capabilities of what a league is, right? So, for example, for us, like, we have a really good working relationship with all the publishers that we operate in, and we have a relatively good reputation, because when we enter a particular game, we're able to build hype and interest for that particular title. If you look at all the most popular leagues globally, what drives viewership there, it's rivalries, it's stories, it's the content, it's the storytelling that's behind those leagues, right? And so if you look at, for example, I spend a lot of time watching the Premier League, but City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, United, there's those rivalries that exist, right? Liverpool as well, and people want to hear the narratives that go with that every single year. And so for us, it's like when we enter a league, it's our job to work with the publisher to build interest with fans.
And how much of that is you then, how much of it's publisher, right? So the PCS is a really interesting example,
PCS,
right?
I would say, like, it's almost like a 50-50 relationship that we work with Riot. Riot actually works a lot on the marketing side, and we support that significantly. We bring our own flavor. So, one of the things that we do a lot is we do a lot of smack talking.
Yeah,
and we do a lot of
memes,
memes
in the meme section,
right? So memes are like a big part of sort of the gaming community, and it's a great viral way to reach huge audiences. And some of the stuff that we did at Worlds, like we League of Legends page, I think, has over 1 million followers, and they usually get 150 to 170K views per video. We did a video, and we got 170,000 views on a video that we did playing Unicorns of Love, right? So we did this silly meme. But the point is that it's 50-50. Riot has particular ways that they run the content side of things, and they want the teams to bring their unique angle and also create some rivalries between other teams. So that's also part of why we did the Smack Talk, because we want a reaction back from the other teams. Now, whether they're game for that, some of them are not always, but I think we do have a little bit of creative freedom in esports, different from traditional sport, is that we're allowed to smack talk each other, and it's acceptable behavior.
And do you think that's partly because of the audience as well? So the people you're talking to tend to be from a slightly younger demographic. They're more comfortable with social media. They're looking for the kind of the memes of the latest meme, right? That's what they're looking for.
Exactly. And even if you look at traditional sports, although Chelsea football clubs and the big football clubs don't do it, there's all these side Instagram pages, Facebook pages, where people are just creating memes about their teams, and the engagement is incredibly strong there because it sells narratives and stories. So yeah, I think from the meme side, it's just a lot of it is driven by the audience. Like, our demographic of people who follow esports tend to be in the younger range, from like sort of 15 to 35-year-old male and females.
But is that consistent across markets, do you think?
It's very consistent across markets, and if not even younger across certain titles. Like, if we go into Southeast Asia, I would say those ages get dragged down, like from 11 to 25 for Thailand as our key demographic, right? And that's where most of the audience exists. And because they grew up in a world where memes are a normal way to communicate, and also a way that they learn about events that happen globally, being able to tie that to esports is another thing that I think resonates with them. They didn't
read it in the newspapers like us dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Right? But I think one of the really interesting things for me, and that you'll be familiar with, and that those who have come across Talon will be familiar with, is your recent tie-up with Paris Saint-Germain, right? Mm-hmm. And that is a name, PSG is a name which resonates with most sports fans, I'd say. If you're a football fan, you know immediately who they are. If you're not, you probably have a very good idea if someone gives you the full name rather than just saying PSG. Now, it's kind of, and I'll let you talk about this a bit more in terms of how the partnership came about, what it means and what it looks like. But it just kind of shows to me how big it is in some ways, right? How much the traditional sports companies and traditional sports teams are taking esports seriously. So for those who didn't know, and I'll let Sean explain this in a moment, in a bit more detail, you've done a deal recently where you renamed or rebranded your really successful League of Legends team, which went to the Worlds in Shanghai last month, as PSG Talon. And actually maybe now is a good way to do that. We can let you give us a bit of an intro as to how that deal came about, what it looks like and what it means for you, and how it means you can take the Talon brand and really sort of level it up, to use gamer speak. Right?
Yeah. So it's actually funny how it all came together. It was actually Garena that helped us do that, so thank you, Garena. But essentially what was happening was some of the PSG people were in Thailand. And I remember we were, I just finished a meeting with the publisher just to talk about what are the plans for next year. And he's like, Sean, can you just wait another hour and come back? And I'm like, dude, it's peak hour in Bangkok. Like, I don't want to take 40 minutes to go 5 meters down the road to get back to my hotel. So I reluctantly stayed an hour, and then, we met with the PSG guys, and they kind of explained their vision and what they're looking to achieve in Asia. And sort of that helped us sort of be convinced that this could be a working relationship that would progress things forward. I think we share a very similar mindset around wanting to win everything. That's something that's very consistent. Like PSG, obviously, dominant in their local leagues and have a very strong goal of winning the Champions League. And for us, it's very similar. We want to dominate domestically, and we also want to go to Worlds and be competitive, and hopefully one day bring that trophy back. But we had backwards, forwards in discussions, but eventually it was all approved. But just want to talk a little bit about sort of their thinking around why they're coming to Asia and why they're investing in esports, and then I'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of the deal. Essentially, for League One, which is the French league that they play in, obviously the viewership in Asia is not as strong. Even though the Paris brand is incredibly strong, it's just obviously there's not as many people watching it compared to, say, the Premier League. So if you look at Asia, Thailand, Hong Kong, China, most of the people are spending their time following Premier League teams and watching the Premier League. And also it doesn't help that they play at sort of 5 a.m. in the morning every day here in Asia, so no one's really watching as much. But their view was, how do I continue to diversify our brand, and how do we continue to build our brand into Asia Pacific? And so obviously with football, it's one way that they've done it. They have two of the best players in the world with Neymar and Mbappe. They've got Air Jordan, they've got Nike, they've got amazing gear which they've used to promote their brand, celebrities as well. But here in Asia, what they've decided to focus on to build their brand is to go on the esports route. So they actually sponsor 2 teams. Well, actually 3 teams here in Asia. The first one is LGD PSG. So that's a Dota 2 team based out of mainland China, and that deal has been there for like 3 or 4 years. They also run a Brawl Star teams out of Singapore, which is a mobile title, and now they've sponsored us for the greater APAC region when it comes to League of Legends. In regards to our corporation, there are sort of 4 key areas that we are working with them on. Firstly, on the sponsorship side, obviously PSG is, if you go onto their website, they have about 50 sponsors on their website. So essentially they have a very large dedicated team when it comes to sponsorships and marketing, and they basically support us on that front, which is incredibly powerful because our organization is still relatively young. We've only been around 2 or 3 years, although we've achieved a lot in a very short period of time. Sometimes, history is history, right? You can't catch that up without the time that you have. And so, being able to leverage them when it comes to sponsorship conversations is incredibly powerful because, they have a huge network that they're able to sort of leverage and help us on that side commercially.
And that brand is really important, right? Because you created a lock-up logo, right, which we can see up top there. And normally brands, especially rights holders, are really conservative, let's say, with how the logo can be used. Often you want to keep, if you're Paris Saint-Germain, you want to keep that distinct from the Talon stuff. But one thing I found really interesting about you guys is how you did that lock-up logo. So that's what it looked like before. That's the PSG logo, and then he came up with this, which is super cool and very unusual. But maybe talk us a bit through how that came about, and was it difficult to get him to do that, or was that something that you found easy?
So surprisingly, PSG, the way they've done the LGD stuff, it's very separated. It says LGD, you have a line, and then you have the PSG logo. And Dan, who's sitting at the back there, was like, let's just go for it and try something a bit crazy, right? So we presented them basically six options, and my favorite option is actually this option. And so PSG is actually incredibly supportive, and when we presented all the options to them, they said we love this one the most because it shows the unity and the relationship that we're trying to build together, which is a true partnership, not a who's a superficial branding opportunity that we're going to make.
It's incredibly powerful, right? It's incredibly powerful to have that PSG IP and that logo right in the heart of it and still see the talent stuff around there.
Exactly, because we're wrapping around their logo. So I think that's kind of quite powerful that they've let us do that. And, shout out to the PSG team, particularly Fabian and Ali, who were very supportive of this and have allowed us to do this. So that's something that they were always open about. And, even when it comes to the merch, like we've got some of the guys here, Lance, who's one of our lead designers, and Hot Dog, our professional player, this Nike PSG Talon collaboration, which you cannot buy, you can only collect.
Yeah, I've actually got one on my chair here. Shall I share it?
Is an example of
can't see Lance, it's the t-shirt, right? Yeah.
Is an example of how PSG, we actually own the IP rights to sell branded PSG Talon gear across the APAC region. So that's another business initiative that they've allowed us to do, is that we're allowed to design clothing as long as it's streetwear related, not performance related, and it conflicts with Nike, that we're allowed to design stuff and push stuff out, and they're very open to that. And so I think that's very powerful as well. So yeah, just to touch on the last two things which they support us on the marketing and social media side, if we want to promote any brand or want to promote any post, basically the PSG social media engine is behind us. So basically that amplifies that viewership globally. And also on the performance side, we actually go to France once or twice a year to sit down with their football teams, their judo teams, their handball teams, and actually learn how we can improve our operations to become, professionalize the esports space even further.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks for that. And actually, that's a really good segue into the next thing I want to chat to you about, which is around the commercialization and sponsorship part of it, and sort of and part of that is actually running a team, right? So when we're talking about this, I think a lot of people now are familiar with the idea of having a sort of esport, a house, right, where you have your team, they sit, they train, they live together, they work together. But actually, maybe people haven't quite understood how much that takes on the team side to create that, right? You don't just have a computer and get a lease down in Corte Bay, right? You actually have to set up some structure around that, training programs, diet, coaching, all the rest of it. And maybe you could just give people in the room and online a little bit of insight into that side of things, in terms of sort of from a team owner's perspective, what does it look and feel like to have 5, 6, 7 League of Legends players living together, training together, working towards something like the World Championships?
So I think people from the outside may kind of see it and think, oh, it's just a whole bunch of guys sitting together playing computer games. It's not. I think that's a disrespect to all the guys that have dedicated all their time to being professional players. And Hot Dog is here today in Street Fighter. I recommend anyone to come play him afterwards. He'll probably beat everyone blindfolded. But that's just the honest truth of the gap of the knowledge, right? But to talk about sort of how we put everything together, we have sort of 4 key business departments that work together to build a team, right? The first one is our performance management division, which is headed by a gentleman named Do-hoon, who's based out of Korea. And on that side, there's a whole framework around how we approach performance management at Talon. Being able to win leagues in esports is not easy. It's incredibly competitive. And you need to have a systematic process when it comes to identifying talent, retaining talent, building talent, and basically working towards an objective of, say, something like winning worlds. The whole infrastructure that goes behind it, we have dedicated coaches, we have dedicated analysts, we have dedicated IT systems that are built to manage players, right? And there's actually a lot of sports science stuff that we're implementing going into next year. For example, IoT wearable devices, physical training, all things that we're focusing on. Hot Dog himself actually trains at one of the local gyms here called ATP. We are basically in the process of relocating our League of Legends team back here to Hong Kong, and part of that is that we want to put them through a rigorous training exercise, because healthy body, healthy mind, right? Yeah. Diet, sleep, supplements, anything that can squeeze out an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% out of players.
How much are these guys doing a day? How much they play? How much they practice in a day?
So yeah, for a game like League of Legends, if people don't realize, these guys train upwards from 12 to 16 hours a day. And that's all they do 6 days a week. And that's the only way you can get to the highest level of these respective games. There is, I've played League of Legends casually, I've played Street Fighter casually, and I can get to, let's say, an amateur level. But to get to the highest level, the amount of dedication and time those guys put in are quite significant. So it's, I have an utmost respect for those guys. I've done a lot of work in sort of traditional sport as well. And there are a lot of course, removing the physical punishment that you have to do for physical sport, the effort, the dedication, the focus, and the intelligence that you need to be good at these games, I would say is almost very similar, if not the same, as traditional sport, removing the physical side.
And the other thing is, I guess it's not free, right? It costs money, it's hard, it's difficult to create these structures to make successful people. So I'm not asking you to get into figures here, but in terms of that funding side of things, it's hard, right? Because teams are not self-funding, they cost a lot of money to run.
Yes.
Where, for Talon, at the moment, do you see your key revenue streams coming from? And where do you kind of want them to come from? So where are you going on that? Where are you on that journey?
So right now, I would say like our key revenue streams, which are driving the business, are around publisher fees and around winnings and around sponsorships. Right? What do I mean by publisher fees? It breaks down to a couple of things. Firstly, there are increasingly more and more TV media rights deals being struck, or online deals being struck with various platforms such as Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, where these platforms are paying for exclusive rights for these various tournaments, and then the publisher is sharing those fees down to the teams. For Riot, for example, as well, we attended both MSI at Worlds. During that time, they sold in-game skin items, which are basically essentially costumes or items that you can consume inside the game, and that revenue is shared with the teams as well, which is fundamentally important for us. And also, publisher fees can also come from some of the leagues that we operate in are franchised, which means that essentially it's similar to like the NBA, where we're technically equity owners of that league. So any profitability, any sort of deals that are struck on that level are actually distributed down to the teams, and we actually benefit from that. Winnings is also a big part. Prize money in esports continues to grow significantly. A good example is, although we don't play this game, the TI last year in Shanghai 2019, the winning team won about 16 to 17 million US dollars on the 5 players that
we thought about getting into that game.
Yeah, it's something we want to definitely get into. But the per player, I think they walked away with an average of $3 to $4, $5 million each. And we compare that to Novak Djokovic, who, say, won the Australian Open last year. Those players actually made more money than professional tennis player, the #1 tennis player in the world. So it just shows the interest. And what's crazy about Dota is that prize pool is community funded. So it's all the people that are playing that game that are investing into that game. So prize money is a big part of it because of just the size of the prize pools that are now available in esports. They continue to increase. And sort of the third part is the sponsorship side. And so that's basically where brands are working with us to have their leveraging our audiences in the league, our own social media, where they can basically promote particular products and services, and basically we help them drive, awareness, adoption, revenue for their particular products and services.
Yeah, thanks. And that sponsorship point, we can maybe build on that a little bit, right? So I think what we've got up on the next slide, if I'm right, is some of the kind of inventory which you typically see for Talon, right? So the sort of things which you can sell. And I think we've highlighted in bold and underlined, so this is not exhaustive, right? But we've highlighted in bold and underlined some of the things which I think are particularly interesting. So you've got things like logo exposure for in-game launchers, which is particularly unique, and we can come on to explain what the in-game launcher looks like. We've got the clothing collab, we've got ad breaks during Twitch streams, product placement. And for me, what's interesting about this is if you're a football club or whatever, you've got a shirt sponsor, a title sponsor for your stadium, maybe you have a training kit sponsor or something like that. Maybe you have a partner in a specific vertical in a specific part of the world. But actually, what I find really interesting about what you guys do and what the players do is that you have this really deep ability to create affinity with brands because you have this very specific, very person-specific inventory. So if one of your gamers is streaming, you can have product placement within it, right? You can have shout-outs for that brand within it from a streamer, and you can have clothing collabs, right? Which are very impactful if they're limited drops, which I think is quite unique to that. So maybe you can help me answer this question because I know you're also familiar with traditional sports, right? Bearing in mind what I've just said, what do you think are the things which are unique to Talon and to esports, in which if I was a sponsor sitting here saying, Sean, look, I could go and sponsor my local football team, I could go and sponsor the Hong Kong tennis team, right? Yeah. Is that what I should be doing, or should I be coming to you? And if so, why should I come to you instead of those guys?
Yeah, I think one of the key things, take it macro and then bring it down to the details here, is that firstly, just the complete audience for gaming as an entertainment and esports as a sub-segment of that is huge. I was just on a panel this morning, and one of the biggest teams in the US, the CEO was saying how gaming is now, X's above both, movie publishing and music publishing, and I think slightly behind traditional cable TV now. And so that audience segment is incredibly powerful because it continues to grow along with the gaming side of things. And so, might be okay now.
Oh, we're back. The guys online are going to be like, what's going on? By the way, people online, you can type in the chat box if you have questions.
Macro-wise, like the audience, if you're looking to hit this young demographic of sort of 15 to 35-year-old male and females that are incredibly engaged, that spend a lot of time watching esports, that are very affinitive to their teams, and I think it's very unique. The audience is very digital, and they're native to being digital, so I think that's incredibly powerful, because if you want to access sort of activations via digital means or even like physical means, you can do it, and people are very excited by that. And I think what's interesting is that, I was at a conference last year, and they were saying that for every, let's say, traditional US sports, for every baseball fan that dies, 2 esports fans are born. And so I think that's another thing to think about, is that, for example, my generation, like, if I'm having kids, like the biggest influence of what you watch in entertainment is a lot of it is your parents, right? And so I've grown up playing video games. I watch esports, although I still watch traditional sport and I play traditional sport. The next generation, my previous boss at my hedge fund is like, Sean, I can't get my kids off goddamn Fortnite off YouTube. That's all they do is just watch people playing Fortnite. So I think that trend is slowly changing, where it is moving more towards gaming as entertainment means. And I honestly think, from my perspective, having seen everything we've seen, it will be the biggest entertainment form in the future. Just to talk a little bit some of the key things here. Obviously, with our PSG Talon team, we can't do it. But for example, having the logo integration is incredibly powerful, because if you look at us, we attended Worlds this year. That PSG logo is now permanently inside that game. Like, whoever plays that game, if I stick that PSG logo, I've bought it, and I stick it on my profile, every single game that I play, or every single PSG Tan that plays, they will see that PSG logo. They may not know what it is, they may go look it up, but essentially all the teams that qualified for Worlds this year, every single year, their logo and their brand is permanently etched into that game. Like, that doesn't change, and that's there forever. Obviously, for our PSG team, we can't do that because we've already got the logo integration, but let's say you're integrating another brand into the logo, you can definitely do that, which is incredibly powerful. And then, that in itself, I think, is extremely strong. In this case, we can't do it, but that's just an example of that. Now, the other thing which is quite powerful is the in-game launcher. So League of Legends is distributed by Garena, and essentially Garena is the publisher of this particular game. And across various game titles, what you're starting to see is that you'll see branding appear inside the game launcher. And for example, for League of Legends, I think I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but it's in the millions, the daily and monthly active users. And this is what you see every time you log in, right?
Every time you log in Southeast Asia, on the Southeast Asia server, this is what happens.
Exactly. And so if you look at the top one here, this is my account for League of Legends. Obviously, you can see that as we qualified for Worlds, they promoted the PSG brand and they promoted Machi. Now, it's not always logos. It can be photos of a player. So if you have a jersey exposure during the PCS finals, they may have the stock photo that we take at the start of the season with all our sponsors, and then that is viewed by millions and millions of active gamers throughout the region, right? And so, like, you can see from the Worlds emotes that, that PSG branding logo is there. Arena of Valor, which is the team that we play in Thailand, you can also see the logo there. This is the League of Legends launcher in Korea. This is Clash Royale on mobile. And the other thing that's starting to happen more and more is, and although we can't involve sponsors as much, but it's in-game item branding. So if you guys play Rainbow Six Siege, which is the first-person shooter game, Ubisoft actually allows us to design our own gun skins, and which means that the Talon branding is permanently etched inside that game. Yeah. So I think that's something that's really powerful that brands perhaps don't understand, is that the teams, they cost a lot to run and activate, but the publishers are very much behind supporting the teams that are there because of the effort and time that we invest. Just another thing to touch on quickly is just on the in-game advertisement. So, for example, we're currently talking to PCS about this, nothing confirmed, but for Arena of Valor in Thailand, there's actually, every time we play our game, there's a 10 to 15 second commercial for our partners. And let's say you've got 200,000 people watching that game, then you get that commercial exposed straight away. So that in itself, I don't know what the media value, but if you calculated that, like, these are very transparent numbers, right? All the online platforms, you can clearly see how many people are watching. That is, in my eyes, worth a lot as well.
And because kind of what I find interesting about that point, right, is that if you look at football, right, which is an industry I know pretty well, people calculate media value by seconds on an advertising board during a Champions League game or whatever it might be. It's really granular as to how you calculate it, but it's also very defined as to what the sponsors are given. Whereas for me, actually, the thing about esports, which is kind of unique, is the level of sponsor integration you get, and the fact that there isn't quite the same way. There isn't that level. There isn't someone saying no. There's someone just saying yes, right? To getting the brand out there, to putting it on more things, to be that brand being accessed in lots of different points, whether it's a game launcher or whether it's an in-game ad, whatever it might be.
Yeah, there's a lot of different access points, and even if you look at some of the examples in, let's say in Thailand for Arena of Valor, like one of the mobile companies there called TrueMove, they just co-branded a prepaid SIM card, where basically if you bought this prepaid SIM card, you had a chance to win particular prizes inside the game. Now, this is more at a publisher level, not at a team side, but it's just an example of something you can do. Just the last part of sort of what we want to mention is, I mentioned before that we have a creative studio, and a lot of the stuff that we do is around branded content. And so that's really important, because as brands enter the space, like using the right language, the right tone, the right games, and making sure that you're producing content that's relevant to gamers is really important. And basically what we can do is, either with the publisher or with PSG or through paid media, we can actually reach a significant amount of people plus our own fan base, right? So there's a lot of opportunities there. And then we have complete capability to do that. So, if a brand comes to and says, hey, Sean, I need your help on promoting this particular product or service, our creative studio actually picks that work up and is able to execute it accordingly. And, we have set amount of inventory for that every year for the brands that we want to work with. And of course, if they want more, that's fine. We just work together with that. But essentially, this is just only some of the things that we have, but you literally have a laundry list of inventory that you get, and a lot of the time the value from the sponsorship is already captured from the media rights from the league because of the viewership that you get, right? So a lot of these leagues, if you got 10,000, 20,000, 200,000 people watching, just having the player appear with the logo there, I think media-wise is already worth a significant amount. On top of that, you do get in-game launches, you get a lot of this branded content that the teams are doing that can help sort of support and build that out even further.
Great. And we've actually got a question in the chat box, amazingly enough, from Robert James. So I thought I'd ask you now rather than wait to the Q&A at the end, because it's kind of relevant to where we are. He says, what issues, Sean, do you see with commercial tie-ups with gambling companies in the esports sector? Now, as someone who's worked in traditional sports a lot, gambling is incredibly pervasive in that industry, right? Any of you who follow the stock market will have done well to buy US gambling stocks in the last 6 months, right? Because of the fact that the US is opening up to sports betting, right? That's the narrative. In esports, what I've noticed and what I've observed is that you don't quite have that same level of integration, if you want to call it that, with gambling companies, even though you can obviously gamble on esports, right? Why is that? And do you think that it will become more prevalent, perhaps, to sort of build on Robert's question? And thank you, Robert, for the question.
Yeah, I think there's basically what happens in the esports space is that there are particular categories that are blocked out by the publisher because they see it as sensitive to their audiences. So if you look at a game like League of Legends, where potentially there's a lot of kids that are under 18, promoting gambling is not something that they want to do. And so, for example, for us, let's say with Riot, there are particular categories such as,
is alcohol in that category?
Yeah, so betting is definitely not allowed. Firearms, some of the cryptocurrency stuff is also not allowed. Pornography, drugs, these types of
beer
stuff.
tie-ups, though, right? So you've seen Harbin Beer have a...
Yeah, so it's slowly opening up, and that's what I think is the key thing, because in the US, the LCS did the deal with Bud Light, which was incredibly powerful, and then in China they did one Harbin Beer, and I think we've been approached by a couple of beer brands, and I think generally Riot has been somewhat okay with looking at these opportunities. Betting is completely off the table for now. There are certain publishers that are open to it. So, for example, Dota 2 and CS:GO, you can have betting partners, and of course that is, the sponsorship deals there are significant because of the fact that there are huge betting audiences for esports, and I think during the whole COVID time, there was just a significant jump in betting on esports because that was the only thing that was running during that time, during the start of the first half of this year. But I would say slowly, the publishers are getting it. I think it's the same in football, right? Originally it was kind of frowned upon, and then if I look at most of the Premier League teams, everyone has a betting sponsor, or the lead sponsor is a betting sponsor, right? So a betting company. So I think slowly will happen over time, because I think it's more of just up to the publishers, but we don't really have any power in that. We can have conversations with them, but generally I would say that it's dictated by the publisher, and we work with them according to what they've restricted and what they've allowed.
And do you think that's kind of a big potential market? And they say you should never ask a question you don't know the answer to. I don't know the answer to this one, right? Is it a huge potential market, or is there only a small number of people who watch esports?
It's a huge market, because we know, we've been approached by some of the betting companies out of Europe and the US, and they've asked us, and the money that they've thrown at, even before having a conversation, we know that obviously it's a huge market, right? And it does also cause a lot of issues for us, because for our players, we need to be very careful about educating them about, this type of stuff, because you can bet openly, right? But, these platforms are available, they're everywhere, and you can bet across multiple jurisdictions, across multiple titles, and across multiple games, and even down to things like who gets the first kill or who gets the first thing. These are all doable, but I think depending on the publisher, you have to be sensitive, but definitely for sure it's a huge lucrative market, yeah. Okay,
cool. Maybe we can move on to something a bit more wholesome, which is memes. We were talking about this earlier, right? So what we did, we picked out a few so the bottom right one was your most viewed, most shared, most liked one. We've got a few other examples of that. We were talking about it a little bit earlier, right? That it really connects with your audience, and this is kind of part of your, not, I wouldn't say DNA, but part of your personality, right? As an organisation, is this kind of stuff. Maybe you could just give the people in the room who aren't so familiar with Talon a bit more of a flavour of exactly what you see the sort of personality of Talon is, right? If you're a person, who would it be, and what would it do?
Yeah, so we did a branding exercise at the start of this year, and we kind of talked about some of the personalities that we really like. I've got to be honest, when I played football, I shit talk a lot. Right? So when I'm on the pitch, it's like I'm always constantly in the ear of particular players and constantly saying things, and it's something that resonated.
So is Talon the extension of Sean in
no.
the gaming
It's actually something that we all resonated with as a management team when we did our branding exercise for the year, that this is something that we wanted to do. And it's not just that, but I think it's also exciting to just change the viewership up, because I think what's happened particularly in particular leagues such as the PCS, where things have been so respectful, that this type of culture it just adds a bit of spice to it, right?
Yeah.
Similar to what the UFC does. Do all the fighters really hate each other before the fight? I would say no. Do I really hate all the other esports teams in the PCS? No. But it's something that we work actively to able to build hype and interest in our audience in order to be able to basically just get more people to watch, right? Because people love conflict, right?
It's storytelling, right? Fundamentally, storytelling.
Exactly.
And so the story you have to tell is there has to be some competitive tension there, because people want to see. And as a football fan, right, I remember when Arsenal used to play Man United, and they hated each other. Yeah. They didn't have to storytell around it. Yeah. But it made the game so big that non-Arsenal and non-Manchester United fans would just tune in because of the rivalry. Yeah. Right, and you had these epic games. Yeah. And I guess that's what you're trying to create, right? Is that storytelling, that narrative that you can then take to a new audience.
Exactly. And part of that is just that all the side content. I mean, look at Arsenal TV, right? I watch it every time Arsenal loses, because the way the fans rage, it's something that's great to watch, right? So it's the game's good to watch, of course, it's that competitive, but then pre and post game, having some additional content that kind of adds to that spice is really important. And we are trying to build rivalries, and we are trying to build a narrative where basically, we're trying to dominate the league. Everyone else is basically trying to knock us down. We can be self-deprecating. One of the characters that we really liked was Conan O'Brien, where, he can mock other people, but he's also very open to mocking himself. So when we lose, we openly mock ourselves. And I think it's kind of like a bit of humility check for us. But, even for example, this one where we came third in groups, is one of our most popular popular tweets during that time. But I think it's just, we thought we did well, and it was worth celebrating, right? We didn't make it into the top 8, but it was still hilarious. Now, the other one that we did here was with Unicorns of Love, which is a Russian-based team, and so we try and get basically themed memes that follow the teams that we play. The slapping competitions in Russia has been something that's very popular. And so we just took a video.
I'll take your word for that one.
A lot of people watch it. If you haven't watched it, I recommend just go on YouTube and type in Russian slap competition.
I've seen the original of that one. It's brutal.
So we combined this video with the dancers for the coffins. I'm not sure if there was a very popular meme, and we combined those two things together and it actually did quite well. But this is really great. Even I would say a lot of the big US teams now, when they do memes, they're starting to integrate brands into it as well. So, Team Liquid, for example, when they left, they had the Pepe Le Frog meme looking sad, and he was wearing Alienware headset and holding a Monster Energy drink can. So things like that are slowly being integrated, because when it comes to brand awareness, like for any esports team, I can confidently say that memes outperform all the other content that we have, because this is what people want to see. They want to see teams smack talking each other, and that's what has been incredibly popular. At Worlds recently, we smack talked LGD and JDG, two of the Chinese teams.
One of the best teams, right?
Yeah, and then people were copying our memes and just blasting it all over Bilibili, and it's great because the Chinese fans are the same thing. There was one where there was a video clip of a Chinese reporter going to a Chinese soccer team national game, and obviously China got smashed, and they were like, all the fans outside were super angry, and they basically just readapted that for when we beat LGD. Nice. So stuff like that is really powerful.
It's that authenticity, right?
It's authenticity, yeah. And what's crazy is that people think this almost looks like a fan page, some of the stuff that we do, but all the esports teams do it, and there's a lot of power to it because of the fact that there's a lot of banter between teams, and that's kind of necessary, because if you can do that, you can really build on a number of strong impressions. And you can clearly see, our Twitter page for the PSG page is still relatively new, but average impressions that we usually get on a month is 327. During Worlds, 4.5 million was the average impression, basically the impressions we got for that month. And like I said, all the memes that we did consistently outperformed all the other posts that we did by 4 to 5x, and so this video went actually viral. I think you're going to have a few more viewers
of the Russian face slapping championships after this. For those who haven't seen it. I want to change pace quickly. We've got about 5 minutes of chat between you and I left, and then we're going to open up for Q&A if people have got questions. If you're online and tuned in, type them in the chat box. I can see you here. But so before we get onto that, just to change pace a bit, I wanted to talk or ask you really about Valorant, which is the next big thing. So Valorant, for those who don't know, is a first-person shooter game. It's very similar to a lot of other first-person shooter games which have been on the market. It's published by Riot Games, who we've talked a lot about on this in this panel. And the reason we've talked a lot about Riot, I think, is because in our view, they're the sort of leading light of how to turn a game into an esport, right? So Valorant was released 6 months ago, I believe, maybe a little bit more than that, clearly with the intention in the long term of being a major esport, right? And so Talon, and I'll let you explain this because you'll do a better job of it than I will. You effectively have the right to commercialize that at a certain level in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan over the next few years. So you are effectively being charged by Riot with building that groundswell of support to make it an esport. Yep. So maybe you can just give us a couple of minutes on what Valorant is, what you plan to do with it, and where Talon is in that journey at the moment.
Sure. Valorant is a 5v5 tactical shooter. The closest games that are similar to this, I could say, if you've played games, it's a mix between Overwatch and Counter-Strike CSGO. This game, I think, in APAC will do incredibly well, simply because there are a couple of things that they've done that's very unique. Firstly, the game is free to play, so it means that anyone can access it. Secondly, they've had dedicated servers that have been put in throughout Asia, which is really important because the competitors such as Counter-Strike have not done that, and that's where they've seen the gap here in Asia. And the last thing that they've done, which is incredibly powerful, is that the game runs on any single PC. So even though the graphics are decent looking, it's quite it's somewhat
but
basic.
They're not the highest graphics.
They're not the highest graphics. Like if you look at Call of Duty, obviously that game looks super realistic. This is not the most realistic looking game, but they've basically built it accordingly so that it's accessible by many people. So that's really important. Now, Riot is incredibly successful at building esports titles, and they've done that with League of Legends. And the key difference that they have versus other gaming publishers is that they spend 100% of their marketing budget on esports because they know that this is how you can create a game that's sticky. Now, if you look at League of Legends, that game is 11 years old, but it still continues to be one of the most popular games. So what they're doing next year, and we're actually starting some of it this year, is actually have grant the IP rights to these tournaments to basically tournament operators or organizations that are within the region, which can help grow the sort of popularity of it. So as of 2021, we will have the exclusive rights for Valorant esports for Hong Kong, Taiwan, Macau. We will also have the exclusive rights for a new mobile title called Wild Rift in Hong Kong only. So essentially we are the league operator, so similar to like the English Premier League, and we can monetize this league and develop it accordingly. And so we've been working very hard with our sort of production partners to create inventory assets that will allow for brands to activate within the space, because it's important to have a strong league and a strong viewership, but we also want to see what brands we can work with to extend that to the audiences that we have. So, things like advertisements, things like QR codes, things like branding are all available inside the game. And we've learned a lot from Riot in showing us how they've done it for League of Legends and basically taking the lessons that they've got from that particular title and applying it to Valorant.
And I've just put up a timeline up here, which is kind of your proposed 2021
so
season, right? And so
this is a rough timeline. So yeah, essentially we'll be running 3 splits. Each split I think has been condensed down to 6 to 8 weeks. But essentially this will be one of the first leagues in Hong Kong that will be running throughout the whole year. And also for Wild Rift, we'll be actually bringing esports leagues into Hong Kong that are running on a weekly basis rather than, on a once-off. So at the moment, these basically, we are running an event in November if you guys want to tune in, which is more open. So semi-professional, amateur, and professional teams will be combining. But
we can enter if you think you're good.
It's closed now, but if you want to enter, for sure. And these will be more of a sort of semi-professional, professional focus. But we want to basically help build the ecosystem here in Hong Kong. We think Valorant is a very interesting title. Also with Wild Rift as well, the mobile version of League of Legends will also be a very strong title. And basically working with Cyberport as well to basically build the production quality of this out to a stage where it's at the highest levels that we can provide for viewers as well as the partners that we potentially can work with. Yeah.
Very cool. And I thought we could just put up as the last point on Valorant is this, right? Which is it's kind of interesting because this is what a broadcast looks like of an esports event. So this is based on the LPL, which is the League of Legends Pro League in China, which is the sort of the archetypal professional league in Asia, right? So if you look across that, what's interesting is it kind of builds a bit like a traditional sports broadcast, right? And you can build a series of programs around it, build shoulder programming, and then you have your main event. But there's integration sort of on a sponsor and commercial level all the way from the start to the end, right?
Yeah. So the whole broadcast, we built it from the ground up with the focus on commercialization, because I think that's really important. That we want to have a huge audience, but also we want to be able to work with brands who want to promote those products and services to that audience as well. So you can see, like for example, the countdown timer. You have all the brands there. On the pre-show with the broadcasters, you do a lot of product placements on the analyst desks. Inside the, say, map band pick or like player band picks, you have logo exposure. Even like, for example, in League of Legends, I think for the Worlds it was sponsored by Axe or one of the other brands, where basically they were like, this is the, 30-second replay of a really cool play powered by Red Bull, powered by MasterCard, powered by these type of things. Post-match, there's a whole bunch of different things that are happening, and also logo integration, and sort of, once again, the man of the match can be presented by a particular brand and things like that. So there's a whole slew of inventory. And at the end, even between game transitions, we'll be actually running advertisements as well. And so a lot of these things are available for brands. And I think, I think in November and December, when we run the First Strike event, we have 3 partners already on board. If people are interested, happy for them to tune in and to see how we're integrating commercialization into the broadcast, because we completely understand the fact that, it's not just about brand awareness. It's also about transitioning customers down that funnel to actual acquisition and actually spending money on products and services. And so the great thing about digital is that we can do that through QR codes, we can do that through ads, we can do that through logo placement, and there are a lot of different activation opportunities that are incredibly powerful that I would say, you know, we have a lot more movement and flexibility to have versus traditional sports, right? Because, you know, if you watch soccer, it's 90 minutes, it's fixed. You don't really have these cutaways or these opportunities where you can brand certain components of the game. Whereas in esports, we have a lot of flexibility simply because it's digital in nature, and we are generally armed with the tools to be able to transition particular moments inside the game.
Cool, very cool, thank you. And we're running out of time, so what I'll ask is, in the audience, prime yourself with questions. I've got a couple on the chat box which I can ask you, but before we do that, can you give us 30 seconds on kind of what is next, right? What do you see? This is your vision, right? So put your vision up here to create the leading Pan-Asian esports platform. Now that's a big, hairy goal, right? What do you, how do you intend to achieve that, right? Give it in 30 seconds. What do you think what are the next steps of Talon? Where are you going, and where does the journey take you, right?
Yeah, I'll say the next steps for us is to continue to expand and building our footprint in new regions within Southeast Asia. We see huge market opportunities within all these places: Vietnam, Laos, Indonesia, Philippines, all huge markets, very young populations, and where mobile and gaming adoption is incredibly high. There are local competitors there, but we want to enter those markets and basically build out very quickly championships and also social media following and a marketing presence there that is incredibly strong. That is our focus. We are, next couple of years, also focused on building out the tournament side of things, right? We really want to focus that and keep building out our creative studio. You know, for us, building diversified revenue streams within the esports business is really important. I don't want to just rely on just winnings and sponsorships. I think, you know, whether it's the merchandise line, whether it's the events, whether it's the creative studio, these are all things that we're looking to explore. And yeah, we just want to build a brand that becomes digitally recognized, right? So if you look at, you know, I see brands like the Lakers, New York Yankees, you know, the Dallas Cowboys, where literally everyone in the globe somewhat knows what that is. We want to do that in the digital space, within the esports space, and when people see that Talon logo, they're like, well, yeah, that's one of the best teams in Asia Pacific. So that's our focus. It's a lot of hard work. We have to juggle many different business lines and have to do many different things, which I think is a difficult, unique part of running an esports team, is that, you know, we have multiple divisions and multiple things that we have to juggle, whereas, you know, traditionally, you know, startups, you're focusing on getting one thing done, but for us, we have to do multiple, and that does create a lot of difficulties and a lot of stress on our team. But we're up for the challenge. We're excited by it. We're all passionate gamers and we love this space, and the good thing is that it doesn't feel like a job per se, you know, because we're doing something that we love. So yeah, you know, our vision is truly to become the Pan-Asian esports team, and we want to basically dominate markets all the way from Japan down to Australia. That's the objective.
Well, we very much wish you luck on that journey, and we're great to have you as a friend of the firm. I've got a couple of questions here. If there's any in the audience, just shove your hand up, and the girls at the back will get you a mic. If not, I will ask a couple from here, and then we can wrap up. So the first question I had is from Anthony. Anthony, thanks for your question. He says, this feels like we're going back in time. As he says, Sean, what's your view on people who say, I don't get the obsession with people watching other people playing a video game? Now, maybe can I try and answer that one first for you? Because, so for those of you in the room, if you hang around after for a few minutes, Sean's been kind enough to bring Hot Dog. He's just sitting just over there. He's going to give us a demo of just how good you can be at Street Fighter, right? And I kind of say that slightly flippantly, but also slightly not. There's a huge difference, right, between people who are good at things, who are saying in League of Legends, whether it's Street Fighter or League of Legends. There's a huge difference between people who are great at it and people who are not. The reason I would go and pay to watch France play football is because they're better at it than I am, frankly, right? And I kind of enjoy watching them at it. And the same way, for those of you in the room, you'll be lucky enough to see just how good someone can be at it, right? And I'd actually take you up on the challenge of seeing if Hot Dog can play with his eyes closed and beat people today.
Yeah, so I think the logic is exactly the same. You know, I grew up playing video games, and I also grew up playing traditional sports. And the reason why I watch Premier League football, the same reason as you mentioned, is because I want to see the teamwork, the skill, and the physical effort that it takes to play at that level. Esports is the same, right? I've been okay at games, but I've never been great at games. But when you see the professional level of gamers, then there's truly something that's unique and special. I think and Hot Dog will show everyone here today that for him to be that good at this game, it's not a virtue of luck. It's a virtue of the work ethic and his knowledge and his effort that he's put into this particular gaming title. And the reason why people want to watch the Capcom Pro Tour, which is the professional level of Street Fighter, or people want to watch Street Fighter League, is because of his ability to play his game. And I can confidently say, and I'll put 500 Hong Kong dollars down, if anyone can beat Hot Dog tonight, I will pay 500 Hong Kong dollars tonight. But I honestly think...
This is a big reveal when I bring in someone.
I honestly think that even if he played with one button, that he'd probably be able to beat like everyone here. That's just how big the skill gap is. And I don't think people realize like the knowledge that it takes to get good at a game like Street Fighter. It's incredibly difficult. And for me, it's like super fast-paced chess. And I don't think people understand it. But I think it'd be a great example. You know, recently we were at another venture capital firm playing Street Fighter, and Hot Dog played blindfolded, and he beat everyone. So that's just by sound cues only, but it just shows like the technical skill that it's required. And the reason why people want to watch is the skill, right? Although you may not understand it, because it's a sport that it's like, you know, the first time if you watch cricket, you don't understand the effort and skill that it takes to bowl at 130 to 150 kilometers, right? And the skill for a batsman to be able to see that and be able to defend and hit shots from that. It's incredibly hard. And if you don't understand the sport of cricket, you don't understand the nuances of that. So I'd say with esports, it's the same thing. It's just that you need to just dive into the game, understand it yourself, and then when you see what professional players are doing, you start to kind of appreciate sort of the skill that it takes. But, you know, as I mentioned before, the work ethic, the time, and the skill that people put in to be able to be successful at this game, it's I have the utmost respect for, because it's not something that's easy to achieve. Yeah.
Cool. And I've got two more questions. We'll do them quite quickly so that we can wrap up in a second. The first one is from Adam, who says, is one of the problems with esports that there isn't a global governing body? And there isn't, right? There isn't a FIFA of esports. There isn't an IOC of esports. Is that a problem, or does it not really matter?
I don't think it really matters so much, because, you know, I think all the regions, all the games are self-governed, and actually most of the power is with the publisher. So if Riot says they want to do this, or Garena or Activision Blizzard say they want to do this, then basically you just have to follow what they say. I think it's more just an education thing. I think more esports teams and people within the industry need to go out and explain more about how this comes together. I don't think what we're doing is rocket science. I think it's more just a deluge of information and it being not very organized. So when people look at it, it looks like it's very overwhelming, particularly if you don't come from a gaming background. And that's something that I completely agree with. I think knowledge can be there, it just needs to be closed. And it's our job as, you know, as teams and league operators to explain things better. And I think once that education improves, it will be there. And, you know, I think as more and more traditional sports teams plow into this space, I think it's something that will continue to grow and is important. And so it's really up to you know, us to provide that knowledge and hopefully increase people's awareness and understanding of what it is. Yeah.
Cool. I think we have one question in the room. All right. We can go for a last and final question. So make it a good one, please. No pressure.
I wanted to understand advertising via influencers. So traditionally, you would formulate a storyboard as an agency. There's a whole process. You have very curated ads that you show on television. I guess the influencers are more at the moment in time sort of advertising. So I just wanted to understand what is, I guess, the guidance or the framework that's placed around that, and I guess also just reflecting on your means as well. What kind of IP due diligence that you might do in using pictures or other things that support the internet?
That's a really good question, thank you. I'm just going to repeat it for the guys online because I'm not sure the mic is working. So the question, just to summarise, I guess, was what's the advertising framework like? What's the creative process like in esports? And maybe how is that slightly different from traditional sports? And then also, what are the controls around the intellectual property? We saw the lockup logo stuff we had earlier, and it's on the screen now, right? Yeah. And so how do you see that as, and the interesting thing about you guys, right, is that you don't just use your own IP, you kind of create it, you create content, etc. Yeah. So how do you see that, Sean?
Yeah, so for the influencer side of things, it depends on sort of who owns them and where they sit, right? So, you know, there are MCNs, which are like multi-channel networks, where basically they sit underneath a particular agency firm, and it's very similar to, like, say, a modeling agency, where essentially you say, I want this person, and because of this reach, and I want to pay them this much to post, and then they basically take your brief, help them structure it a little bit, or in many cases, the influencer will just do it themselves because they have their own team that's running behind it. Because a lot of these YouTube channels, at least they will have 1 or 2 people, like a video editor, a social media person, the actual talent that will be sitting upon that. Now, how much the agency supports on the creative side, honestly, it varies, I think, from agency to agency. Just to talk about what we do at Talon. So, for example, if you were in Thailand, and let's just give an example, like we had like Grab come to us and they wanted to film a music video. Essentially, we take the brief, we pick it up, we have our creative team sit down and basically look at all the talent that we have and figure out what's the best way to put it together. We work on basically the storyboarding and the IP. We then share it with the client. If they're happy with it, then basically we'll go ahead and execute, and then we'll push it out to the various social media platforms accordingly. And, you know, if there's any copyright issues in regards to the music, we'll make sure that we use non-copyright music, or if it's our own original soundtrack, then we'll run with that. Now, to talk about memes, generally it's an accepted culture that any memes that are out there, that there is no sort of IP discussions that need to go with that. I have not heard of any esports team or anyone on the internet who's created a meme that's been in trouble with a particular sort of the meme culture. I think the internet culture around memes and Reddit and 9gag is all about sharing. So if someone does come up with something, generally it's a free IP use. Now, I completely get it. If we took a stock photo from, you know, another platform and we mimic that, then that would be different. But generally, I would say, you know, you have somewhat of a creative freedom if you create your own customization on those memes, to a point that we haven't had any issues or have seen any issues within the esports space around the use of these memes, simply because of what the community is. And if you go on Reddit, no one's claiming ownership of these memes. These are basically user-generated content that is to be shared online and experienced online. Of course, there needs to be some sort of customization, which we generally do, and that's kind of how we do it. Legalese-wise, I would say I don't really have the answer to that. I honestly do not know.
We'll give you the answers after the session.
I honestly don't know, but all I can say is that we've never seen any esports teams or ourselves faced issues with running memes in that way.
Okay. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up there, so apologies to anyone who had questions and a couple of guys online who I think I didn't manage to get to. But thank you very much to you for coming. Thank you to the guys online for joining. For those of you in the room, as I said, we're going to do a very quick turnaround here, and you'll be able to play Hot Dog at Street Fighter on this screen. So if you've never played computer games on a 9-screen, now is your chance. But just to wrap up, I just want to say thank you very much to Sean. It's wonderful to have you here. Good job. Thanks very much, guys. So help yourself to drink outside, and we'll do a quick turnaround in here, and you can come back and play Street Fighter to your heart's content. Thanks very much for coming today.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Alex.